History of a Love for History. When I sit down for classes and listen to lectures here at Appalachian State University, I'm often struck by memories of the past. They come to me in fragments of shattered memories, like light bursting forth when someone turns on the lights. I remember how I became interested in a career as a lawyer. The path wasn't easy, and I was uncertain at best. I had other career options before me, and yet I couldn't seem to choose. Let us go back to those uncertain times and relive the story together. It was a warm, humid summer day in late August. The students at Lake Norman Charter High School were adjusting to their new workloads and busy school schedules. I remember the roar and chatter of the hallways fill up my ears as I dragged my feet to an early morning class. I was not ready for the day, or the school year for that matter. I could feel the fear and nervousness penetrating my body, as cool as ice. I was unsure of my college future, and I had only a year to decide my fate. I was hanging on to the hope of being a computer scientist, maybe, but the complexity and the unfulfilling nature of coding did not catch my interest like it used to. The only reason I felt like I had a shot at being a computer scientist was because of my family. My family, you see, is filled to the brim with computer scientists. I wanted to be like them, but I didn't have the will or technical ability. At one point in time, I wanted to be an astronomer also, but that was quickly shot down by my family. "How are you going to support your family or yourself?" asked my father and mother. "What can you do with an astronomy degree?" The truth was, I didn't have an adequate answer for them. I thought that maybe I could be a professor in the future, but that didn't seem plausible or even reliable. So, I focused on my career as a computer scientist. This I found was futile as well. I couldn't focus on the coding or the complexity. So, I walked into my AP US government class dejectedly and took my seat as class began. "Can anyone tell me what the first party system in the United States was?" asked Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown was my AP US government teacher for the year. He was a rather tall, middle-aged man with a ginger beard and a knack for humor. He did not take stupid questions lightly, and always made sure the class was well taught and thorough in their studies. He saw that I had an ability for historical interpretation, even when I did not know I had it myself. The answer is that the first party system in the United States were the Federalists and Democratic Republicans, which were led by Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, respectively. I answered almost immediately. I felt the weight on my chest lift a little, as Mr. Brown nodded his head in agreement. I didn't know why, but I felt almost at home in this class. My sight had expanded beyond the limited scope and darkness of my anxious worries. For the rest of class I answered and joked with Mr. Brown about history and the budding presidential race. "Mr. Brown?" I asked one day after class. "Yes," replied Mr. Brown. "Do you think history is repeating circle?" I asked curiously. There was a long pause, as Mr. Brown contemplated the question for a moment. I could almost hear the gears twisting and turning in his head as he thought rigorously. After a while, he spoke with a hint of amusement in his voice. "History is not repeating, and is instead a competing set of interpretations by historians and authors. I would have thought you knew that, considering how good you are at figuring out these interpretations." Now that gave me pause. I suddenly thought of my love for history and how I interpret it. My parents would always bring it up whenever they could. Was this a sign? I had always been good at reading and deciphering the texts of historians. I felt a spark in my heart. The next question was, how could I use history in a productive way? I got that answer to the question sooner than I expected. The humid summer air changed to a snowy chill when November arrived. I had been anxiously keeping track of the 2016 presidential race through media such as CNN and ABC. How could someone as racist and repulsive as Trump exist? I had asked myself this question time and time again as the race went on. Each day I hoped our country would choose someone stable But it was all in vain. I stared open-mouthed at the ABC News screen that flashed the words, "Donald Trump wins U.S. presidential election." I felt my chest constrict into an uncomfortable pretzel. I knew this would lead to something. My affinity for history already calculated the comparisons between Trump and Richard Nixon. Trump would attack civil liberties and those who protect them, just like Nixon. I'll admit, I was afraid. I was feeling the lonely, creeping darkness of despair overtake me. I felt powerless to the results of the election. I looked back to the screen which flashed the words, "What does this mean for the rule of law?" Suddenly, an idea popped into my mind, a revelation so powerful I nearly had to hold myself up from the force of it. That's what I could do. I could protect civil liberties and rights through the laws governing the country. I could use my love for history to interpret the laws. I could use historical knowledge to interpret the Constitution, to protect those under it. I finally saw what I had to become. I had to become a lawyer, to protect the rule of law. As Mr. Brown's words came to mind, I knew I had to challenge these types of administrations anywhere I could, especially through the media. I finally had my major for college. I sit here now at Appalachian State University and go through my classes. With all this in mind, I am working for a better tomorrow. My job is to uphold the Constitution and protect the rule of law from those who threaten the foundations of it. I have finally had my major, and I intend to use it any way I can.